Hi, this is Adam Asmus from Lingoport, and I'm here for another one of those whiteboard talks. And today I'm going to talk about continuous globalization. This is a term that I'd like to see get popular in our industry. There's continuous everything when it comes to software development, but I rarely see companies really doing anything about continuously making globalization, that is internationalization, abbreviated by I-18N, and localization, that's the sort of translation looking part of their development process. It's usually something that comes later. And so we're going to talk about what that process looks like. What I'm describing here is a solution our company makes. Lingoport.com is where you can look us up. But this solution is called the Globalizer Suite. You'll see Globalizer Express on our site and the like. But the idea here is it's a package of software that works together to make this all actually come together in a way that you can repeat and do over and over again. So let's get into continuous globalization. By the way, we'll be tweeting on this based on hashtag continuous G11N, G11N being short for globalization. All right, so let's pretend you're a global company, and you probably are a global company if you're watching this, but in any case, most companies, even companies delivering software for worldwide markets for a lot of years, have a lot of hiccups still and many manual processes between the software development teams and what I'll call the localization teams. And I think it's a lot because the handoffs are very manual and there's very little visibility to what's going on between the two organizations. So if you're a team here and you're developing software, you're writing, you're submitting your stuff for source code, you have your sprint, everything's all done and you're moving on. Well, you've moved on as a developer, if that's who you are, and your localization team is just getting the warning that you're done with a sprint. Or maybe they're even integrated, if you're really thinking forward, they're integrated into each Scrum team, but you still are waiting and you have a bunch of manual processes to find out, well, what's changed in the code? What's happened? And then we'll perform a bunch of QA functionally, and then we'll work out the localization. We'll manually take the stuff out that needs to be localized. We'll push it through. Even if you're running a script, usually somebody has to remember to run the script. You have to make sure that you include everything. There's a lot you could miss. Those files get through. They sort of could be having problems with the files internally. Go to translation, then you have this whole kind of what I call bookkeeping exercise to keep up, because rarely does it all come back at the same time. And even if it did come back at the same time, oh, well, you have one more little project that was missing and you need to add on to it. Now you're actually just to, let's say, add a single other locale, you have this whole process all over again. Or because somebody added 49 additional words, you have this whole manual process to get it to translation and back into the source code again. So that's what we wanted to set out and avoid. Now, many people know us for years as providing internationalization software in the form of our Globalizer product. And we took a lot of that idea behind static analysis or analyzing source code for internationalization issues, and also use that kind of paradigm to address localization and localization changes. So let's talk about how this flow now works. All right, so your team, let's say you've got 4 teams of developers working on your products. You may have very more than that. Each team may have 5 people on it, may have 20 people on it, whatever it is. And they're submitting new features as part of their sprint. They're submitting it into the source. The next morning they check it out again. So they're making their changes. They're writing source code as part of their current sprint and release. By the way, if you're not Agile, chances are you're borrowing pretty heavily from Agile methodology in your development. Something like 80% of developers are calling themselves Agile these days. Whether or not that's true probably is a matter of opinion. But the fact is the truth of where your release is at is in your source code. And by the truth, I mean, what are the changes that are going to affect localization? from an internationalization aspect, and that's the functional stuff in the code, to a localization aspect. How have the words around the UI changed? How have the messages changed? Maybe your generated automated email, those templates may have changed. There's all kinds of places where that content may reside. It may not be just in one nice, neat little area. So really what we're looking at here are what are the changes that affect localization in the first place. Notice we also have a dashboard to look at that. We have a translation process. But really what I'm talking about here is what goes against the source code, and that's where our products are focused. So first thing, as you're developing code during the entire sprint, you really want to be looking at internationalization and not just trusting that people are internationalizing, because then you're kind of hoping that it'll all work out and hoping that QA maybe finds any issues, and it doesn't always work that way. And the reason is that internationalization issues can be really fuzzy. And a lot of development teams can be kind of distributed. They're not always a nucleus team that everybody knows each other and everything. And you can talk to everybody about all the important principles that are part of internationalization. So when I talk about internationalization, I'm talking about embedded strings. That's maybe the simplest thing. You can say, thou shalt not embed a string. Well, that's great. That means you're inserting a key and you have a resource bundle and you've got all the words that will need to be translated or properly in, this is my little resource bundle set, are properly set aside from the source code. That's great, but not everybody else does that. More complex would be building concatenated strings, where you build the string as you go, and that's pretty normal software development methodology, yet it really may break depending upon word order and other languages. Now, the next class, if it's not strings, is like locale functional method, locale sensitive methods. These can be methods, functions, classes, depending upon your programming languages, that need to be passed locale. So let's say you have a calendar class. Unless you're properly implementing, first of all, a calendar class that's locale aware and passing it locale, that function or method or class is not always going to behave the way you want it to. And it's very hard to always catch that in QA, that, oh, hey, now I'm in, pretending I'm in France, and I'm running it, and the day of the week starts on a Monday, not a Sunday, for instance. So those are the kinds of things, or maybe you wrote the number 1,000 as 1.00 instead of 1,00, like you did in the US. So those are the kinds of things you want to be looking for and measuring. There are patterns around Unicode, like did you use a programming pattern that hard codes in an ISO Latin encoding, something like that, or a static file that needs to be looked at for localization, like an image or a movie or a voiceover, whatever it may be. So that can be checked automatically, and when we do that, we can have an automated process that runs against the source code. It goes and it says, give me the source code. Let me pull that down. Actually, it's not this that does it. It's a separate continuous integration process. You pull that down, and you have the globalizer internationalization part of this process. It crunches through the source code, looks for those issues, and it displays them in a dashboard. Why a dashboard? So that everybody can see it. You on the localization team, if that's where you are, you can see, oh, you know, somebody in team 1 created this new problem that's in the code. I want them to look at it. They can drill all the way down. Actually, you can even automate this so that when somebody creates an issue, you automate an email that goes to that team or some manager or the like, wherever you want it to go. So you now have this mechanism that's warning not after you've gone and finished the product and finished the current sprint, but while they're developing. You see in a dashboard, whether you're a development manager or a developer or a localization staff team member or manager, everybody sees it. And there's nothing like unification by visibility. Everybody's accountable. Likewise, you now in the localization team, if that's where you are, or if you're in your development, you can see how much has localization changed. So this team, let's say, team 1 has 146 new words. Well, what a pain to have, the old way to have a manual process to figure that out. What if you just saw that in the dashboard? And that is, in fact, what we're doing. We're checking the source code in the localization engine here, and we're pushing that data up on the dashboard. Now we know we have 146 words, and we might say 500 here or 76 here, or the like. But we know that, and we can see that clearly on the dashboard under the what's called the Resource Manager setting. And we can get all kinds of workflow off of that. So what comes next? Now that we know we have the data in, we might decide, hey, we're ready to push this out for localization. So we have a little link here that says create a prep kit. And that sets off another process that you go and log in and you get going. And by the way, you're also verifying that these resource bundles are in proper format, that there's no missing string IDs, that there's no words without a string IDs without words. The formatting is all good. All that's nice and checked for you, so you don't have an automated process that actually messes you up. Once that's checked, we hit that button, we go out and we are creating a localization kit. Now that localization kit is everything that's needed to perform the translation. That holds all that information, sends those files into translation. Now that translation box, that could be your external vendor. They might have a portal. You can all automate that if you're old school, FTP and email, but or you might have a cloud-based system, or you might have your own internal translation management system that you put a lot of energy into it. Notice, none of this is to manage the translation. It's all the changes that affect globalization that go against the source code. That's what we're doing. Now, when we get the translations back, they go back into this system. The results are shown on the dashboard again. Now we can start to measure things like, how fast did we get that Japanese back? How much turnaround do we have to make? What did it cost? We can measure all kinds of things there. But we're also, and this is really critical, we're measuring to make sure that there's no errors introduced back into those resource bundles before we put them back into the build. We checked, we just verify that there's no missing string IDs. If there's a missing bunch of translations or a single translation, we're going to see that on the dashboard. No more bookkeeping and have to following those loose ends because, oh, that little batch will be delivered in 3 days. You actually have a nice fluid system that automates all that. Now, once you have all that verification, we also check for, did somebody break the file encoding? You know what happens. If you're in localization, you've seen this a million times. Somebody opens a file, makes a small change, saves it, but they forget they're saving it on their own system that maybe is just saving everything and blowing the Unicode encoding if that's what you have by default. So we've all been there, or at least I've seen a lot of people there, where you don't find that out until weeks later and suddenly some of your strings are square blocked and you have to kind of untangle that knot. So back here again, we're seeing it, we're verifying it. Once we've verified it, we push it back to the source code. All of that is automated. Notice that nobody in localization had to ask a developer to run a script. Nobody in development had to run a script to put the changes in the resource bundles back into the source code. And that's the beauty of it. Those are all human error-oriented steps that we can just completely eliminate. And then again, the dashboard is sort of your pilot. You see the status of everything as it goes. And so then what does that let you do? It lets you send off a build, nice, you get a head start on QA. You maybe get more time with in-country reviewers, and you eliminate all of this delay caused by human process, all of this overhead that's around all this. So if we were to take all this and break it down into 3 major attributes, I'll talk about, so this is sort of the takeaway part of the video. Automation, you're automating all these taxes, you're automating all these tasks. And that means you're not doing this blindly. You have checks in between. And that's what your dashboard is for. You're seeing that this is going to go smoothly. So you're not automating something that's going to break everything later. You've got a nice process, but you're leaving out the chances for mistake, and you're leaving out the delay that it costs to get a developer, oh, you know, I'll get to that to get you those files. You've got them. You've got access to them. Conversely, developers can see this. They know where, now this is part of their kind of modus operandi. They know that localization is part of the process, and they can know that. And that's the second point, visibility. The visibility is all in the dashboards. You can see the performance from the developer to the localization engineer, and that means that everybody has a chance of knowing what's coming, being able to proactively rather than reactively manage the process. And finally, we have measurement, and that's where management comes into play. Are you global ready? Are you properly internationalized? Well, what if you know that before you do any of this, that you know that that's not going to be an issue that's going to hurt you and cause you the delay to the release? Are you ready for localization? Is everything ready? Are you in a point where you're ready to push the words out for translation? Yeah, you see what your status is on the dashboard. Now you can make a decision based on that conversation. Hey, I've got enough volume, this makes sense. You're making an intelligent, proactive decision versus, well, let's see where we're at. So again, these three come together and make for a much more fluid, continuous process, and that's our solution. That we're calling it the Globalizer Suite. Go to lingoport.com if you want to find out more about it. There'll be a request a demo button. You can go there, hit that, and we can have a conversation about this and discuss how this can work with your system and how your system is working now and how we can make it really optimal for you. Thank you very much, and join me again for another whiteboard talk soon.